right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Crew Philosopher podcast. I'm your host, the Crew Philosopher here, and I'm joined by a gentleman who I recently started getting into his work. You know, I was trying to find some information on the the migrant crisis happening in New York City, immigration policy overall, and I discovered the work of Mark Krikorian.
Yeah.
Mark Krikorian. It's a funny story, Mark. Your name actually landed in my lap via ChatGPT.
Really? How did that happen?
So I wanted to know about the migration crisis and, why was it happening? So I went to ChatGPT and I asked, hey, do you know any individuals who are experts on?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you could use it almost like as a Google search kind of.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And
I thought it was just for kids trying to cheat on their assignments to, please write an essay for me on this book, which apparently happens.
It's happening too much. But yeah, and your name came up and I started reading your work. And what I liked about it the most was your work is very informative, but I feel like it's easily digestible for the average person.
Well, thank you.
And you don't really find that combination too often. So thank you for coming on the show.
Sure, happy to be here.
All right. So the first thing I want to ask you is the current migrant problem that we have. We have so many people crossing the border. I live in New York City. I told you, before we started recording. And so this is kind of a personal story for me.
Sure.
Can you kind of give an overall background as to how we arrived here?
Sure. When President Biden took office, he inherited a border that, wasn't perfect, but Trump had kind of stabilized things. There was still a lot of stuff to do, a lot of stuff that needed fixing. But it was, like I said, it was kind of stable. What President Biden did literally on the afternoon after he took the oath of office was start undoing everything Trump did on immigration. And what that did was basically send a message, not only from his actions then, but even during the campaign, that it was, open season for people trying to get across the border. In fact, one of our analysts lives in Texas, had gone early on under this administration, was on the other side of the border in Mexico talking to an alien smuggler. And this guy, in between snorting lines of coke and the rest of it, said, look, we're bringing people here because of what he called la invitación, in Spanish, the invitation. In other words, Biden's comments and his policies once in office was an invitation to illegal immigration. And the numbers at the border shot up immediately. And what people were doing is literally turning themselves in. They were flagging down the Border Patrol or complaining if the Border Patrol didn't come fast enough and pick them up, because they knew that they would be let go by this administration's policies. And since over the past 2+ years, this administration has taken into custody and then let go into the United States well over 2 million illegal border crossers. And then another 1.5 million that they know crossed, but in other words, they saw them, they had took cameras, whatever it is, they know they crossed, but they didn't catch. And that kind of thing happens, there's nothing you can do about that. You can reduce that, but it's going to happen. But the most outrageous part is the people the administration took into custody and then just released into the United States. Those are the people that are getting bused to New York City and Chicago and Philly and now Denver as well, and Washington, D.C., because a lot of the people traditionally have immigrants, legal or illegal, have relatives here or friends or something, because not many people just wake up, in, I don't know, Uruguay and say, Tuesday I'm going to move to Chicago just for the heck of it. Doesn't happen. People go where they have relatives. But when Biden has sent out this basically invitation to the illegal immigrants or potential illegal immigrants around the world. A lot of people who don't already have relatives here started coming because they figured, hey, the gringos are letting us in. Let's get while the getting's good before they wise up and close the door.
Yeah.
And so, I've met people like that. I was at the Arizona border a couple months ago at a place where people kind of walk around the end of the fence and just walk in and wait for the Border Patrol to come. And there's so many people, the Border Patrol has set up porta potties there for them, literally. And we met a family from Angola. They had no relatives here or anything, but they'd been living in Brazil for years. Their little kid was born in Brazil, had a Brazilian passport. But when they heard through the grapevine that Americans were just letting people in, especially if they brought a kid with them, they figured, let's trade up. Nobody was persecuting him in Brazil, but, it's why not? So, and in fact, on the same trip, went to that same part of the border in the middle of the night. There was a whole line of people who turned themselves into the Border Patrol, waiting for the bus, literally waiting for their ride. And there was a family of people from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia in the Middle East. They had no relatives here. They had just gotten a ticket from Paris to Cancun, saying they were going on vacation, took the bus up to the border, and said, hey, we're here. Let us go. So anyway, that's what's going on at the border. And it's totally a creation of the president's policies. There's a lot of people want to leave where they are for all kinds of reasons. That's not something we have a lot of control over. But when we're sending the message, hey, if you want to leave where you are, this is the time to come. Say some words about how you're fearing persecution, or bring a kid with you, and or rent a kid, frankly, when you get to the border, because that happens too, and you'll get away with it. And we'll give you a hearing date, 8, 10 years in the future, and whatever. You see what happens then,
Yeah, I saw there was pictures of kind of the summons or whatever they were saying. The court dates were like 2028. I was like, that's like 4 or 5 years from now.
Oh, it's worse. In New York City, they call it a notice to appear. It's like a summons, basically, for immigration. In the city, in New York City, they're issuing ones that aren't going to, require you to come in 2033, 10 years from now. Yes, I've seen them too, 2027 and 28, but I think it was the New York Post reported that in the city itself, 2033. So look, if you're an alien in that situation, you figure even if we start enforcing the law, and if you don't show up, we'll come and get you, which is frankly pretty fanciful. Or if you do show up and you get turned down, even if all of that happens, you've still been able to work here for years. Maybe you've had a couple of kids born here. The likelihood of your being sent back is small. And even if you're sent back, you got to earn this money and send it home for the time you were here. So it's a no-lose proposition for people who want to move here. And yet the whole thing is totally illegal. The administration has no legal authority to be letting people go like this. They figure, well, sue me and maybe we'll stop if we lose in the court, but we'll be able to keep doing this for years and get away with it.
So one thing I want to ask you, though, because you brought up this administration, but I feel like I've been hearing about the immigration problem for a couple of presidents now, right? Back, Trump and I do think Trump, enforced, border laws more than, Obama did. But even Trump seemed like he wasn't really down with certain things that could really, not eradicate, but really limit this problem. So you're saying that the immigration numbers pre-Biden, like, were they a lot less than they are now?
Yeah, a lot less. I mean, this in the fiscal year 2022, there were over to something like 2.2 million illegal border crossings. Now, not all those people got in. Some of those people were bounced back out. The ones who were bounced back out may have tried several times. So some people get a exaggerated idea of the number of people, but that's just in one fiscal year. And that is the record number of border crossings, illegal border crossings ever. And the year before, there were like 1.7 million illegal border crossings. And that was the record. And then in 2022, it broke the record from 2021. So, immigration's never going away. Immigration is just something that a country has to deal with. It's like saying, well, tax policy or foreign policy, that stuff never goes away. Neither will immigration policy. And there's always going to be some problems, and people are always going to have different ideas about what to do. But, and yes, you heard about it under Obama. You heard about it under Bush even. I mean, this is something, like I said, never goes away. But what we've seen over the past 2 years has no precedent in our history. It really is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And the reason for that is not, I think, what a lot of people, for instance, on the right think. They say, well, the Democrats are doing this to, import voters. That's why the Biden administration is doing it.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and there's probably something to it in the long run, but I mean, it's not that many illegal aliens who vote. And by the time, it really doesn't happen that much. If non-citizens vote, usually they're green card holders, often who genuinely think they're allowed to vote. In other words, it happens by mistake, and it doesn't happen that often. Now, in the long run, sure, recent immigrants are more likely to vote Democrat, but that's a very long run thing. What I think is driving this administration's policies is that they don't think limiting immigration is morally acceptable. They think that the immigration law is like Jim Crow, and that or in Spanish, Jaimito Cuervo, and that undermining it is a heroic act. They don't think the American people have the right to keep people out who aren't, terrorists and criminals or whatever. They'll concede that stuff. Some of them won't even concede that. But regular people, just an ordinary working stiff who shows up, has some kind of story of woe or whatever. And frankly, why would you leave if things were perfect in your own country? They don't think we have the right to keep those people out. And so and once you understand that, sort of the rest of it all becomes kind of understandable.
This is fascinating. So your explanation is you believe that what is driving the kind of, I would say, radical left, because there are some Democrats that are also not, who are on our side, but the radical left in particular is kind of a moral imperative. Like, we Statue of Liberty says and they bring them all. That's interesting, because I thought for years I thought it was the voter thing. I was like, because even though they can't vote, their children are U.S. citizens. Right.
No, I'm not saying that that's completely not part of the picture. I'm just saying that's more like background music. You know what I mean? And even, the cheap labor idea, because there's a lot of corporations that like this, and libertarian ideologues, which, in the real world outside the Beltway maybe don't exist very much, but inside Washington, they're actually kind of important politically. For them, it's often cheap labor. This is loosening the labor market so there's more people chasing the jobs and they can be pickier about who they hire. And again, that's something to it. And even this administration, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who's head of Homeland Security, he actually said, when asked about this, that part of the rationale is that businesses are crying out for workers, and this is a way of having more workers. So, but even that, I think, is more like background music. What's really, or maybe the harmony, in other words, but the melody, if you will, is what I'd said, is that they think this is a moral imperative and we're not allowed to keep people out, whether we like it or not.
Okay, so Anna Coulter said something, I don't know if she tweeted it or if I saw a clip on Twitter, where she was kind of talking about, when it comes to Democrats, that with these special interest groups, whether that be, immigrants or LGBTQ or whatever, that kind of post the civil rights movement, there was like this shift where kind of all of these social political issues are kind of filtered through like civil rights, so to speak, and that it's kind of a perversion because with Black Americans in the history in this country, there was a very kind of particular reason why we had to rectify a certain problem, and it's kind of been used by leftists to kind of, I don't know, shoehorn all these other problems in. And when you said that they view it as a moral imperative, immediately what she said in that clip came to my mind, and that could be the case. But if that's the case, then how do we change their viewpoint?
I don't know. We can change their viewpoint. I mean, I think Anne is right about this. I mean, she says this all the time. She's to people who claim, victimization. Basically, she says, look, your group is not Black Americans. You don't get to pretend that you've experienced the same thing. And look, I'm not trying to pander here, but Black Americans, descendant, old stock Black Americans, I don't mean a Nigerian family that came last week. That's different. That's a unique part of our history, a unique problem, and original sin kind of thing in our history. Nobody else, no ethnic group that's been discriminated against, no one has experienced anything similar to this. And the power of it, though, is such that, like you said, everybody seeking political power tries to say, well, look, we're just like, this is just like the civil rights movement. I'm not sure how many people even believe that, but it's a powerful,
it's useful
message, or a powerful propaganda message that a lot of groups, whether it's gay rights groups or other ethnic groups or whatever, they use that all the time. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any way to change those activists' mind on that other than reduce the incentives, because it's not as successful. And that's only going to work if the public and elected officials say, look, sorry, you're not. Your experience, yes, everybody's had problems. Look, in New England in the 1600s, if you were a Quaker, you were discriminated against. You were an English Protestant, but the wrong kind of English Protestant, you were discriminated against. And they even hanged a couple of them because they wouldn't take the hint and leave Massachusetts. So everybody, look, human beings are broken. Mm-hmm. We're a sinful people. The question is the experience that the group you purport to belong to significantly problematic, sort of beyond, sort of in an order of magnitude different from anyone else's? And no one fits that category except old stock Black Americans. Everyone else tries to be parasitically benefit from it, and I think it's kind of gross.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gross that Black Americans allow it. Like, I've been saying for a while that, it's unfortunate because there's this thing going on between the Black elite and Black people. And you probably see the polls, like police brutality, where most Black people want the same amount of police or more, but the Black elite are the ones asking for these policies that are going to hurt Black people. And so the Black elite have kind of sold out, I think, Black Americans on immigration as well. Because, and you wrote about this, I was reading one of your articles about how controlling immigration helps wages.
Right.
Now, this is an obvious economic argument. I tell people all the time, during the pandemic, we saw a skyrocket for the first time ever, blue collar, low skill workers were getting raises, and everyone was confused. Oh my God, what is happening? It was obvious. We had a surplus of jobs, and we had a finite number of workers, and so companies were competing for the workers, which allowed those workers to finally get raises. Now, most of that was kind of undone with inflation and that stuff, but it was it happened for the first time in a long time, and people were like, oh, what is happening here? But this is like a basic economic argument, and I don't understand why people don't get that. Like, do they not care that, the low skill worker is at a disadvantage when you have kind of this never ending population of people that can pour into the country?
I mean, it's so obvious, and it's been demonstrated so many times that I don't think that people in our sort of leadership classes, not just blacks, I think the problem is there's a disconnect between our leadership people, business, government, everything in general, regardless of what part of our society, and the sort of ordinary people that they purport to speak for. But as far as the wage thing goes, it's not even just less skilled workers. Yes, there's no question that when you reduce immigration and there's fewer new, less skilled workers coming in, the ones who are here, even the immigrants who are here, do better. But it's anybody that employers might rather not hire. For instance, you got ex-cons. In a tight labor market, ex-cons get a second look in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. Now, let's be honest, half of them might be dirtbags. They might steal from you. But what about the other half who do want to clean up their act and rebuild their lives? They're getting a chance that they wouldn't otherwise. A recovering addict, same kind of thing. Would you really want to hire that guy if you're a business? Again, the businessman isn't a bad guy for saying, geez, I don't know if I want, maybe he'll, he may steal from me or something.
Yeah.
But what about, and some recovering addicts may relapse, and you may have been right to not hire that guy. But what about the other guys who do want to rebuild their lives? It's basically, in one sentence, a tight labor market with fewer people chasing more jobs. A tight labor market is the best social policy. You can write welfare checks to people all you want, job training programs, all that stuff. Some of that works, some of it doesn't. But when you allow the market to tighten up, just to give even say a single mom who needs to be home at 3:00 because that's when her kid gets back from school. If she's applying for a job that goes till 5:00, if there's two other people in the waiting room to interview for it, the employer is going to say, look, sorry, but that's the way the job is. I want to help you. The employer there is not the bad guy. But if there's nobody else applying for that job, the employer's kind of stuck and says, okay, damn it, I'll cover the last 2 hours. You're hired. It empowers people who have little market power in the job market. And it seems to me, if you're going to put your finger on the scales, one side or another, your thumb on the scales, it should be on the side of people with less market power, not more. And immigration is a way to do that.
This is why I love talking to people like yourself, because my mind would never even go there. Like, we talked about ex-cons, single moms, and like kind of the forgotten people in society,
right.
Drug addicts, and liberals are always looking, talking about trying to help try them down. And to your point, being able to work is a big deal. And so, if y'all here competing with these other individuals, the least attractive prospective employee, he loses out, or she loses out.
Exactly.
So one thing I want to ask you about the incentives, right? Because like I said, I live in New York City, and when you apply for a job, it is very common for them to ask you, are you a U.S. citizen? And so I never even thought about how are people who are non-citizens like getting employed?
Well,
how's that happening?
If they're legally here, one way or another, it's actually illegal to prefer U.S. citizens over foreigners.
Really?
Assuming they have the right. It is, in fact, the Justice Department has a whole office that does nothing but go after companies that, when a legal worker comes in and presents some kind of ID, and a company says, yeah, I don't know about this green card, you got anything else? They get fined for that.
Wow.
You get fined. I mean, it's kind of remarkable. But if you're talking about illegal workers, because they don't have the right to work, two main ways they get jobs. One is most of them actually work on the books, but they have fake or stolen Social Security numbers. So they present bogus documents, and the employer may even know they're bogus or may not. But even if you suspect they're bogus, unless it's like Mickey Mouse's picture taped onto a driver's license, you are literally not allowed to inquire further as to whether this is a legit. And that's where the E-Verify thing comes in that we'll talk about, because when you submit the information to IRS and Social Security, which you have to do anyway when you hire somebody, that would verify it. But the other way illegals get jobs is what most people think, which is they're working under the table, working for cash, working, in some way outside the normal labor market. And that's a lot of that. But I'll emphasize, most illegals, we estimate 55 to 60%. Social Security Administration suspects even more than that, work on the books. It's just they have fake information and get away with it.
All right, so E-Verify. First time I heard the term was reading an article about DeSantis in Florida, and didn't know what it was. Looked into E-Verify. To me, it seemed to me like common sense. You're right, like
why aren't we doing this already? I mean,
yeah. So I was confused. I was like, I thought maybe like this was something that was happening already. And then I looked into it. There was like this chart that had a picture of the U.S. and it showed the states that use E-Verify, the states that don't, the states that tried it, but I guess it was like blocked or something. And most places aren't using E-Verify.
Yep. The map you were talking about is states that have a state requirement for E-Verify, which they're allowed to have. There's no national requirement. Look, just for listeners, E-Verify's online free system, run by DHS, so that when you hire somebody, and you have to put in their Social Security Administration, Social Security number and stuff when you hire them anyway for, withholding taxes and stuff, you also check that against this DHS database and the Social Security database. And what they put in is the name, Social Security number, date of birth, which you have to have that. You have to give that to your employer anyway. And what it checks is that number real? Does it match the name, and does it match the date of birth? So you could fool it. Like if you're a Chinese spy with, some laboratory making fake IDs or what, you can fool it. But if you lock your car door at night, somebody could break in, but you do it anyway because it's just improved security. That's what E-Verify does. Probably about half of new hires are already screened through E-Verify, but it's voluntary. So that the illegals are mainly, obviously, in the other half. And so there's been repeated attempts to get E-Verify as a universal labor standard. So it's just done everywhere. And there's even been suggestion it was under the Trump administration, but they didn't end up getting it ready in time, just to have the government doing the E-Verify. So in other words, when you submit the stuff for IRS and Social Security, they will just check it themselves rather than you're having to go and do an extra step at a different website, which would make it even easier to do. Why, like you said, why most people would think, well, obviously, if you submit a fake Social Security number, they're going to know. Well, no, because even though it's illegal to hire illegal aliens, and that only happened in 1986, before 1986, the law specifically said it was legal to hire illegal aliens. But all it requires is you fill out a paper form. And, the employer winks, you wink, oh, yeah, oh, here's my ID, and it's like, oh, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. You know what I mean? E-Verify makes it a lot harder to get away with that. And again, it's not like every illegal alien will immediately no longer be in the workforce, because a lot of them do work off the books. But it is the easiest thing to take care of a huge part of the problem and make it less appealing for illegal immigrants to come here in the first place. And in fact, you'll see this in fast food restaurants. If you ever notice, sometimes on the door, there'll be a sticker that says, "We use E-Verify." And point of that is, Mr. Illegal Immigrant Job Seeker, please go to the Wendy's across the street. We're not hiring you here. You know, that kind of thing.
So when the E-Verify stuff came around on Twitter when I was with DeSantis, somebody had tweeted, that, hey, for all the people who are applauding E-Verify, don't think the government won't use that information for, I guess, nefarious purposes.
Yeah.
Is there any legitimate fear of that, or is that kind of just
that's fear mongering, because you're already submitting this information to Social Security and IRS. All this is doing is making sure that that's true, making sure that the person you're hiring is not a liar. Now, if you think that the IRS shouldn't exist and there should be no Social Security and you shouldn't have to pay taxes and all that, okay, yeah. But, that's a decision we made a long time ago. Social Security Administration was founded in 1937. You want to revisit that? Okay, whatever. Go and bring it up in Congress. But as long as we have this kind of system, it seems to me pretty obvious we should try to make sure people aren't lying about who they are.
Yeah. So when I was reading in one of your articles, what I liked about it is you brought up E-Verify, but you also brought up that E-Verify is like a tool to use, but it isn't the only solution. And so from your vantage point, you kind of view it as, hey, we should implement a bunch of things in order to combat the illegal immigration problem. And so outside of E-Verify, I guess I would ask you, what other, tools or steps you think we can take as a country to, bring down the illegal immigration numbers?
There are three things I think that we can do that would make a big difference. And the wall is not necessarily one of them. I'm not against it, but it's not that important. The first is E-Verify. The second is, again, something people probably think we already have. We need a fully working check-in, check-out system for foreign visitors, because a big share of illegal aliens are not people who jump the border. They're people who come in as tourists or students or whatever, and then just never leave because nobody's looking for them. And our check-in part, like when you come here as a foreigner and you have to go through immigration at the airport, that's a lot better than it used to be. 9/11 really did wake up some people, and that's been improved. It really has been improved. I mean, there are things in the government that can get better, and that's been one. The problem is the check out part is still a joke. Well, if you don't know which visitor has checked out, you don't know who's still here. The visa overstayers, they call them, and nobody's looking for them. They've done little steps, baby steps to improving that. It's nothing. So making sure that is up and running is make a huge impact. And then the third thing is sanctuary cities have to be banned. You cannot be a sanctuary city, because what you're saying sanctuary city is saying is basically thumbing its nose at federal law, because most people who get deported, most illegal aliens, they come to the attention of ICE not because they're wandering around some barrio asking people for their papers. It's because you got arrested for a regular crime. In other words, you beat up your girlfriend, you sold drugs, drove drunk, whatever it is. And then when the cops scanned your fingerprints, because it's all scanned now, there's no like ink. Like when I was a kid, the police shows, you're putting your fingers on an ink pad and rolling it on paper. It's all digital electronic now, even in, the remotest sheriff's department somewhere, in the country. But because of that, those fingerprints immediately go not just to the FBI to see if, there's a warrant out for your arrest somewhere. They also go to Homeland Security now, so that ICE actually gets alerted if an illegal immigrant who's somehow in their records, like maybe he was deported 5 years ago or something like that, is arrested for a regular crime. That comes up, it's flagged. And if ICE has the resources to go get that person, they let the jurisdiction know, hey, please hold on to him for 48 hours beyond when you might let him go because we want to come and pick him up. What a sanctuary city means is they say, screw you, we're not going to do that. We're just going to let him go. And that can't be allowed, both because it's outrageous, but also that's the main way that the federal government will learn of illegal immigrants. And quite frankly, they're the ones you want to deport first anyway. You can't deport everybody. It's just not realistic. So how about deporting the ones who get arrested for other crimes and focus on that first? And sanctuary cities make that impossible. It can't be allowed. And there's ways you can do it. You can deny federal funding, what have you, but Congress needs to make it clear that that's not going to be tolerated.
You know what? Hearing you say that, I think it was yesterday, Eric Adams finally waved the white flag on the on the right to housing stuff that happens in New York City. The busing the immigrants thing seems to have worked as far as, for a long time, this was just a border state problem. So if you was Arizona, Texas, no one really cared.
Right.
Outside of people who cared about the issue overall. But if you lived in a blue city, New York City, we would have all this rhetoric about, how racist these states were because they were, trying to do illegal immigration. And now that they have bused these individuals too, I think New York City has either 20,000 or 60,000 people. It is an insane number. And Eric Adams is like, I can't handle this problem anymore. Do you think now, because he has become more critical of the Biden administration? Now, that said, I think him and Governor Hochul are making a mistake because they're asking Biden to expedite the right for them to work. And I'm like, well, you're incentivizing the problem. Like you said, it's like people came in, they broke the law, and now they get to speed pass and get jobs. I think that's a mistake. But I do like that they are now critical of the Biden administration. So the busing, to me, I think has been a success.
It was an amazing success. And I think all of the people that have been bussed out of Texas and some in Arizona too, and then Florida, those people who were flown to Martha's Vineyard, I think it's like 40,000 people total. And I think New York's gotten the lion's share of them, but, this is going to Chicago and Philly and other places. That's like a week's worth of people at the border. So in other words, it's just like a drop in the bucket. And yet even that little drop in the bucket has gotten Eric Adams and the folks in Chicago, I forget the name of the new mayor, he's not mayor yet. But anyway, it's gotten these sanctuary cities crying foul. And it's like, okay, well, you were advertising you were a sanctuary, and now we're calling your bluff. And obviously they're not happy about it. So I was skeptical that it would make much difference.
Me too.
I mean, I wasn't against it because it's all voluntary and it's a political stunt to some degree, but politics is partly theater. Stunts are okay. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with that. But I figured, it'd be a few days story and that would be the end of it. Wow, was I wrong? I mean, it's some bus tickets. It's the best investment Texas has ever made, in getting attention paid to what's going on now. Adams and Hochul and other people, the main thing they're doing is demanding that the federal government send them more money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's their first reaction. But federal government, how much money do they have? At some point, they are starting to say, this is like bad policy. Why is this even happening? And the bunch of both in Chicago and in New York, they're starting to warehouse some of these people in schools and gyms and that kind of thing. And that is really getting people's attention. And they're not sending them to private schools in the Upper East Side, just or in the North Shore of Chicago. They're sending them to South Chicago, and boy, has that gotten people's attention.
Yeah, I know in New York City there was like a group of parents, mainly moms. And by the way, these were mainly like like Latino women. who was out there protesting, is like, we don't know who these people are, and here's the thing, people don't understand. It's not like they're in the gym and like the school is just being used. No, the kids are in school.
Yep.
Like, think about how crazy that is. The kids are in school, but you have these people who we don't know who they are, who are in this gym while
and they're not locked in the gym. It's not a jail. They can walk out and go to the McDonald's or anywhere they want. I mean, it really is unbelievable. And you can, in a sense, you can feel for the city officials, because what are they going to do with these people? On the other hand, they're partly responsible for this problem. If they don't want it, they need to call and say, stop this, start enforcing the border. And that's something that they're so left wing, they can't bring themselves really to say. But I think at some point, they're going to end up having to say it.
Which has been my main criticism, is that the whole border policy stuff, to me, is a crisis that we could have solved. They're just, for some reason, no one wants to solve it. And it's so frustrating, because it's like crossing the border is the one crime where you can commit and people care about the why a lot, right? Like if you cross the border, but these people are escaping, whatever, right? If a homeless person robbed me, on my way home from work, no one cares about the why. You go to jail because you can't have people robbing people.
Well, it depends. If you got a Soros DA, maybe you don't,
Yeah, that's a good point. But for the most part, in most sane places, that's kind of the rule of law.
Sure.
I just don't understand so much why, appealing to emotions with immigration is so effective. Like, it is really effective.
It is effective, and it has been for a long time. There's a bunch of reasons for it. Part one of it is, look, everybody's got some great grandma or whatever. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people have, somebody, especially in big cities. My great grandma immigrated from Ireland or Italy or China or whatever it is. And so there's that to it. And then also, look, people don't leave their country unless there's some good reason. It's like not a very good place. Either it's disorderly or they want to earn more money or whatever it is. And so they have these compelling stories. But the fact is, Gallup, the polling people, they've done these polls around the world, and they've come to the conclusion that something like 800 million people would leave their homes and move to a developed country if they could. And U.S. is the number one destination. Well, we're not taking 800 million people. And if you want the level of immigration to be higher, we take about 1 million legal immigrants a year, which in my opinion is way too many. But let's say you want it to be 10 million. I don't know. I'm just a ridiculous number, which frankly, if you really opened the borders, you could come up with that. There's plenty of people who can move here. Heck, like in Haiti, it's better to live on the street here than to have a job in Haiti, So yeah, you'd have enormous numbers of people coming. But let's say you want 10 million immigrants a year. Okay, great. What are you willing to do to Mr. 10 million and one?
Yeah.
Let's say he's not a criminal, he's not a terrorist, he's a regular working stiff. Are you willing to track him down, arrest him, detain him, and throw him out of the country? No BS, no 5 years of court. He just do it. If you're not willing to do that, then what you're really for is unlimited immigration. And that, unfortunately, is too much of our leadership classes, whether it's business or people on the left. They want unlimited immigration.
To your point, and I just Googled this to make sure I wasn't mistaken. When you talked about how 800 million people want to move here, and some people actually do want that. There's a gentleman named Matthew Iglesias, who I remember when he said this, because I was like, this sounds insane to me, who he wants 1 billion Americans. So to your point, there are people who want everyone to come here. Like, we hear open borders and we think, oh, that's like a right-wing talking point. No,
it's not.
They want there to be no border, to bring as many people in America as possible. You think is a driven by some moral imperative. I'm still unsure of the motivation, really. But I think it's unsustainable. And even if it is sustainable, I don't believe that a country with 1 billion people would be a country that you would want to live in.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, American moms and dads should be the one deciding how many people are in America. You know what I mean? Not the government, not somebody planning out stuff. This isn't the Soviet Union, for heaven's sake. And, you know, you could fit 1 billion people into the United States. Sure, you stack them all up, you know, great. Do you want to live in a country like that? Don't you want to have some open spaces? You want to preserve national parks? You want to have farmland? You want to be able to get in your car and not have to drive 3 days to get to a place where you could see a cow? You know what I mean? It's a big part of it isn't so much whether we could feed those people or something. Yeah, sure, okay. It's, do you really want to live in a country like that? And when you ask people, do you think there's, you know, too many people where you live? Is it too crowded, or is it not crowded enough, or is it just right? Very few people say, no, where I live isn't crowded enough. We need more people moving here. And this is why I just think that the government shouldn't be deciding whether we have 1 billion people in the United States or not. American moms and dads should. And that's a whole separate issue. Or is, you know, is birth rates down or whatever? Are there reasons for that? I don't know. But immigration isn't like some kind of crutch where people who run the government and run businesses and institutions and media and universities, they say, you know what? Americans just aren't having enough kids. So we need to import people. Basically, having kids is a job Americans won't do. So we need to import foreigners to fill up our country. What kind of stupid policy is that?
No, and to me, there's no curiosity as to why.
Right,
in America, right? So I always say that, you know, I'm a kind of a big, you know, the MAGA movement to me existed before Trump. Like Trump kind of caught the wave, but it was coming. Like the America First, and I'm kind of on that type of time, because I was saying before, like there's America, the country, and there's like the Americans. And so when I kind of look at, you know, data and stuff, and you see how Americans aren't doing that well in many fields. You know, you look at educational attainment, you look at you know, the birth rate, you look at
opioids and stuff. I mean,
there's something in kind of the soil, because when you look at people who aren't Americans but who get on American soil, they're able to thrive, right? And so I'm very curious as to, you know, what's going on with Americans. And one thing I want to ask you about is, we talked a lot about the economic part of illegal immigration. What parts of kind of just the social fabric that no one really talks about at all, but I'm concerned with, because I've been saying for a while that America doesn't really have common threads anymore, right? Like, you know, with, you know, illegal immigration, you know, especially if you have a large quantity of people from, you know, specific areas. I live in New York City, right? Love diversity, and I really do love it. You know, different food and stuff, right? But one thing that I've been paying attention to is how, you know, 20 years ago there was a real emphasis on you had to learn English, right? And it's not that much of an emphasis now. And I'm not saying people have to forget their native tongue, but there's just less English and less enforcement of, hey, you should learn English, right? We don't have language anymore as a common thread. We don't have religion really as a common thread, right? And so I think people are actually not really taking into account how much these threads really hold a country together. And when you don't have these threads, bad things are kind of down the line.
Absolutely. I mean, look, when you have especially a country like ours that's been diverse in whatever you mean by diverse from day one. I mean, diverse used to be, you know, Dutch in New York and English in Connecticut, but it was still diverse. They hated each other, and you know what I mean? So that you need to have a sort of overarching national identity. And, that can be hard to do. A lot of countries, like in Africa and elsewhere that were like new countries, they have a lot of different people. They have a hard time coming up with a kind of overarching national identity. We've actually been able to do a pretty good job of fostering and developing and passing on a pretty strong national identity under which you do whatever, eat whatever food you want, whatever, who cares? And the difference today isn't really the immigrants. In other words, I hear this a lot from people on my side of this debate. They're like, my grandpa from Palermo wanted to become an American, and what's wrong with these people today? The immigrants aren't that different. They're coming into a country that's different.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two ways that it's different. One of them is actually good. With transportation and communication so advanced, you can keep in touch and even almost live in the home country in a way that just wasn't possible in the past. I mean, look, we're doing this over Zoom.
Yep.
You're hundreds of miles from where I am. In the old days, you couldn't hop on a plane and go to your cousin's wedding in Sicily, for a 4-day weekend and come back. You could go, but in other words, it was days, weeks of travel, that kind of thing. That's a good thing. But again, what that means is that the practical necessity to kind of pull up your roots and be part of the new country is just a lot weaker.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is a bad part of modern society, which is we have lost our leadership classes have lost the cultural self-confidence to tell people, look, wherever you came from is fine, but now you have to, in Rome, do as the Romans do. You're here, assimilate. And that's English, but a lot of people learn English. They learn English before they get here because they've been watching movies and, all of that stuff. So that part is, in a sense, easier. But assimilation isn't just learning English and driving on the right side of the road. It's, feeling that this country is now your country, that this country's glories and sins in the past are now yours. And you often get, you'll get people nowadays that will say, for instance, slavery was a long time ago. My ancestors were worse off, frankly, than the slaves back then. So what do I give a damn? And, on the one hand, that might even be true, but so what? It's now your history, whether you like it or not, as well as all the good parts of our history. In other words, when I give a speech, although Democrat administrations don't invite me, but I give speeches often to new citizen swearing-in ceremonies where, it's a naturalization ceremony. They've gone through the paperwork and they raise their hand and they take the oath of allegiance. And then there's like a welcoming address, 4 or 5 minutes. And one of the things I say is, look, America's glories and its sins are now yours. And that there's this idea in Judaism that if you convert to Judaism, you are considered to have been spiritually present when Moses presented the 10 Commandments to the people of Israel, even if those weren't your ancestors, because you are now adopted. Well, in a non-religious sense, it's the same thing, is that once you become an American citizen, you are now spiritually present when the Declaration of Independence was signed. When the flag went up on Iwo Jima, even though your ancestors had nothing to do with that, it doesn't matter. You are now adopted as an American. That idea is something our political and business and intellectual class hates. They don't accept it. And so how can you Americanize people when the people running the country don't believe they should be Americanized? And so that's a problem. Immigrants didn't create that. Immigrants didn't come here saying, hey, I want to hate America. No, they're just regular people. They're taking cues from what they hear and what they're told. But until we fix that problem, how can we keep taking 1 million people every year and expect them to successfully become Americans?
I guess that was great. I guess my last question for you would be kind of as we move towards 2024, the next presidential election coming up. I think there was like a video from like Ron DeSantis' team, like a presidential that he's running officially.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
rumors, but official.
No, I think I mean, we're taping this on, I don't know when you run this, but we're taping this on the 24th on Wednesday, and he's supposed to announce tonight on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Elon Musk is going to be interviewing him on Twitter, and he's going to announce then.
So 2024, do you think, because you would think that immigration would be kind of a big issue for the 2024 presidential race, but you just never know, given, you have immigration, you have, Ukraine, you have, the economy. Do you think immigration will be kind of a main issue in the 2024, presidential run? And if so, do you think this kind of, with Ron DeSantis' success in Florida, do you think it will help him, beat Trump in the Republican race and then go on to beat Joe Biden? Or
yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a big issue. Let me just clarify. I run the Center for Immigration Studies. We're a nonprofit. We don't get involved in elections. You can take a look at cis.org and see what we're about. But as a citizen and a voter, yes, it's definitely going to be an issue, even in the primary. Now, you would think, well, Trump was pretty hawkish on immigration, and DeSantis, frankly, is more hawkish on immigration. Trump has never been a big fan of E-Verify. He's actually been against it. When unemployment was really low right before COVID hit, everything was going really well. Trump actually said publicly that he wanted to increase immigration because businessmen were telling him they were having a hard time hiring people. So there's plenty of room to Trump's right for DeSantis to attack him. And DeSantis has said repeatedly on the record, he thinks overall legal immigration is too high and needs to be reduced. In other words, not just illegal, but legal. He pushed for an E-Verify mandate in Florida. He got a limited one passed in his first term, and he got it expanded this term. He wanted it for all new hires. His own party fought against him, the Chamber of Commerce, farmer Republicans. But he still got it for all businesses with more than 25 workers, which is still a big improvement. So my point is, I think certainly DeSantis is going to make immigration one of his talking points against Trump, even in the primary. And then in the general election, whoever wins, it's just so obvious that they're going to go after Biden on immigration. It's going to be a pretty important thing. Now, if Trump is the nominee, it's going to resonate less with a lot of voters in the middle, because they just so dislike the guy that if he said you should take a shower, they would stop bathing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas DeSantis doesn't have that same
stench.
That same intensity of hatred. This obviously real activists on the left don't like him, but it's the middle is what wins elections. And people in the middle either are well disposed toward him or don't know much about him at all. He's not gonna, so that when he says, look, this border thing is ridiculous, it's going to be received better by voters in the middle. And that's why I think he's got a way better chance of actually beating Biden, because, Biden could win. I mean, he's weak, obviously, for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, it's kind of an exaggeration even to say he's president. He's sort of a figurehead.
Yeah.
It's like the King of England, he doesn't run anything, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, it's not impossible that he could win, especially against Trump. So, but the long and the short answer is yes, it's going to be an issue coming up every day, both in the primaries and in the general election.
All right. Well, Mark, once again, thank you for coming on. This has been a great hour. Like I said, I've learned so much, even when you have me thinking about the single moms and the ex-cons. Just, we don't view it through that lens. I feel like if you don't really specialize in this specific topic.
Well, I've been doing this for close to 30 years, so it takes a while for me to think of stuff, but eventually you'll think of it. So, and just so I could get a plug in again, our website is cis.org. You can just sign up for emails if you want to sort of keep up with what we're doing. We don't sell our lists, we don't pester you and all that, but it's if you're interested, it's worth doing. And the other thing is, if you have a taste for snark and sarcasm, I'm on Twitter at Mark S as in Stephen, Mark S Krikorian. And I tweet a lot, not just about immigration. And like I said, you need to have a taste for sarcasm if you're going to enjoy my feed.
Yeah, I'm gonna put all of that in the show notes, so you'll be able to just go right there and click on Mark's Twitter, find his website. But like I said, thank you once again. This has been a great conversation. As far as the people who are watching and listening, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. I will see you guys in a week's time. Deuces.